Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this LinkedIn Live event. A fascinating topic and two great speakers that will help us understand a bit more about what is happening with this raw material in the raw material world and how can we deal with it. But before that, let's focus for a moment on the audience. And we are interested to know a bit more about you. For instance, how about if you tell us where you're located? I think, it will be interesting to see uh, where are the people that are with us today. Now, Thierry is based in Finland. Francesco and I are based in Switzerland, but I'm pretty sure that we are going to get participants from many, many, many different locations. So just let us know where are you right now so that we can get an idea about yourself. And in the meantime, that you tell us a bit more about yourself, how about if I ask something more about our speakers, and I will ask Francesco to introduce himself.
Ciao Giuseppe, it's not of course the first time that we are dealing with such an event. I'm Francesco Lucchetta. I hold almost 20 years, even plus, of supply chain and strategic procurement experience. I'm currently working for Pentair as a director for the EMEA region. And yeah, I'm very pleased to be here with you guys.
Okay, fantastic. Then, Thierry.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure if we are all coming from the same side of the world. So anyway, good day, everyone. I am Thierry. I lead the sourcing organization globally for Kemira, which is a Finnish originating global company in the chemistry arena. 35 years of business experience, both from sales and procurement across the world. Happy to be with you to discuss about a quite interesting topic at the moment for many procurement organizations.
Perfect. I mean, we didn't ask the people about their function. Now, looking at the names, I do recognize a few people that are working in procurement, but also people that are working in sales. We have consultant, and we have quite a variety of people. And as you may have seen from some of the names scrolling, also from so many different locations. So great. So I guess the question which is on everybody's mind, and maybe let me start with Thierry. Of course, feel free to add other perspective, etc. But Thierry, what is causing the recent extraordinary raw material shortages and price hikes?
Well, Giuseppe, while different industries might have a different answer to that, I think there are just for everyone similarity in the amount and the unprecedented juxtaposition of circumstances that are very specific, that we could potentially classify in three categories. One is sanitary crisis driven, COVID-19. The second one is an economical environment. And the third one is for certain industries also unprecedented climate-driven situations. So if I could use example on those three just to illustrate, and for the people to understand that those circumstances have one thing in common, is that they have been sudden, massive, and they have been fastly evolving. So if you take the COVID-19, governments put people under any kind of sanitary restrictions, limiting the ability for the people to come to work and significantly impacting the operations for many manufacturing and not only manufacturing companies. If you talk about the economy, the effect of that created a massive slowdown of the economy, but very quickly after, with a huge rebound that was also very surprising for a lot of people. So you have a very fast depletion of the supply chain and a very fast need for a rebuild, almost equally of importance, if not more. And the last one is climatic events So depending on the industry you are participating in, some regions of the world have gone through in the course of the last 18 months through very massive climatic incidents. So you can use, for example, the freeze storm in south of US that has literally paralyzed 1/3, if not to say 40% of the US chemical industry, as an example. Or if we use the more recent energy crunch in China that is caused by the need to start to consider environmental aspects, and then also there, massive impact suddenly on certain number of dynamics.
Very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Thierry. Anything else that you want to add, Francesco? Or
No, it was such complete and such shareable as a point of view that I would have nothing to add to this.
perfect. Then let me ask a question to you, Francesco. I mean, how did the companies react to the situation? You know, how did the focus change, let's say?
I see three macro trends on this. At first, there's a switch of priorities. Even on strategic organizations, we switched from the consideration of getting material productivity year over year as a given to getting materials as not a given. So the primary focus of many chief supply chain officers, chief procurement officers has been switching by creating value out of materials to getting materials. And this was not a given again on particular industries. We have been seeing struggles related to semiconductors, for example, which is I would say one of the components, one of the commodities that may affect probably the 80% of the manufacturing goods. So huge impact at the end. Second macro trend has been having a look to logistic costs. We have been seeing that stopping operations in Far East delivered understandable impact also on the availability of containers and on sea shipping. And this brought the need back of building a local for local strategy, which was trying to privilege local operators in order to fasten the supply chain, the entire value chain of the products, and to be ready to increase the readiness, I would say, from a local perspective to the potential needs at the moment they would have been picking up again, and trends would have been rising again in terms of consumption. And the third macro trend that I'm actually seeing in this industry is working capital insurance, not working capital optimization. So companies are going, I would say, a couple of decades back into the strategy of reducing the stock and are very much willing to increase the stocks in order to prevent anyway other shortages to impact their value chain. Of course, every money that we are paying, every coin that we are giving as a money has two sides. If on one hand you are trying to get safety out of those behaviors, on the other hand you create additional stress over the production. There are studies, bank studies by banks, and investors are usually very good observers of the world and the trends. Those bank studies say that we are 10 or even in some industries 20% above the capacity with the demand that we are currently delivering to producers. And this because the self-generated demand out of risk management, of course, increased the need of creating buffers and creating stocks. The real point is how much time those trends are going to last in the market, because this, of course, has an impact on the strategy set point for the next years to come.
Excellent. Thank you, Francesco. And don't know, Thierry, if there is something that you want to add, or that maybe different from one industry to another, something that may be relevant.
Well, I think the most companies, they try to adapt very fast to the situation. Some industries are more affected than others. If you look at, for example, at the moment, automotive industry is one of the most impacted by the market situation, but not only. If you look at electronics, like for example, when you hear a company like Apple that has to make a crazy choice for a company like them to say, I can't produce at the same time both the iPad and the iPhone because I don't have enough components for both. And I have to make a choice. And I make the decisive choice that I'm launching the iPhone 13. So I'm gonna put as a priority the iPhone, and I suspend the production of the iPad, or I do much more limited production. So it means that companies in different industries have more or less different effect, but they are about the same. It means that you need to react quickly, you need to reposition quickly, and for sure, one thing that is remarkable is that the companies that have had over the years created a significant exposure to a more global environment, more than a regional environment, are the most affected among all. So the people that went hard time on the so-called whether you call it best country sourcing or low cost country sourcing, whatever naming we give to it, but basically relying on a very different region for most of your input material, then those companies get the most impact because they get the highest dependency to those market circumstances that we have seen that are unprecedented.
Yeah. By the way, this since you touched on the logistic challenges, let me mention also to our audience that our next LinkedIn Live will indeed be on the topic about what is happening in terms of the logistics, the global challenge that we have on transportation across the world. Will be the 8th of December with two top procurement executives that will be with us to help us understand a bit more on this topic. So stay tuned. We will promote this event very soon, and that will be the opportunity to discover also some more on another component that is keeping our night sleepless as we try to manage the supply in our companies. Now, I also want to mention that this is your event. So it's really up to you to ask the questions that are important to you, the doubts that you have. So do not hesitate to ask questions, and we will take them and we will ask our expert to give us their perspective on this. So I do have the first question here. So how about if we start with Pierre-Luc's question? So prices are high and markets are in inverse configuration. Is this the proper timing to create buffer stocks? If yes, how to evaluate proper price to do it over time?
That's an interesting question that is almost like a CFO question. But if I may, it really depends where the center of gravity of the decision is situated. If sensitivity to the supply is the essence, then it's not a question of price, and then there is no bad moment to make that decision. It's just that if there is a need to secure the production via building up buffer inventory, that decision needs to be made maybe at higher prices. But if it's a business that is more driven towards high sensitivity about the margins, where the input cost is of tremendous significance, then it becomes a very valid question to say, what are we better off? Producing at crazy prices and storing material, whether raw material or finished goods, at very high cost, or potentially starting to take another route, which is limiting the production, not to be exposed to that cost inflation that is beyond manageable. And that's a dilemma that a number of companies are confronted with at the moment. If I may use just an example, certain chemicals are very energy intensive. Yes, there is such a pool of demand by the downstream industries that everybody is trying to replenish inventories. But at the same time, those companies are exposed to a massive cost surge on energy, up to the point that certain of those companies, they make the careful assessment and they decide it's not worth it. So we don't produce, we don't rebuild the inventories, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also take this from the point of view of the specialties. Thierry was mentioning chemicals. Chemicals are, of course, divided into commodity chemicals and in specialty chemicals. There have been people dealing with specialty chemicals in the last period, which have been affected by a dramatic market switch. So before they were available to each and every customer that could have been demanding them, and after the COVID crisis, they have been reserved, maybe fully booked, also for out of country laws and whatever, for the healthcare market and for the healthcare follow up. And this created dramatic shortages with industries that were tight anyway to those raw materials to be used. In that case, I would say that stock is a priority, but at the moment of time that you don't have the material available on the market, probably more than the stock, chances are that your best option will be creating right away a second source, multiple sources that you can use to fill potential higher demand or spike and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you want a different perspective, is your business top line driven or bottom line driven? Top line driven, let's say that biotech or luxury watches, etc. Then you want to make sure that you have as much product as possible, and maybe the product cost is 3%, 5% of the overall product. So you don't worry little about whether the price is more or less high. You want to make sure that you can produce your products. When, of course, the focus is on the bottom line, a very competitive market, then you are much more careful in making those type of decisions. Okay, there is another question from Francois. How about taking the next question from the audience? Do you foresee industry will adjust up the capacity or fear a GFC such as 2008?
Now, a great question. I can start. Again, the answer might be different depending on the industry, how capital intensive, how building up capacity takes time. If I take the industry, I know the best is the chemical industry. You talk about very capital intensive assets that take a lot of time to be erected and to come on stream. So this is not, it's almost like a big tanker that takes time to be reoriented. It's not a speedboat that you can, in a very speedy manner reposition. So those are typically decisions that take a year to be studied, and then they take 2, 3, 4 years to be erected. So you can see that the answer to that question is very much dependent on the nature of the industry. And if you take the chemical industry, one of the elements that participate into the current market environment in terms of supply tightness is the fact that, yes, over the recent past, a number of companies maybe have underinvested because the return on economics that they were seeing were not good enough to justify, and the promise, the outlook of the economy was not good enough to justify putting that money and that capital to erect new capacities. Now, we are certainly at a turn where if there is no crash of the global economy, most of those companies, they are seeing a good profile for the demand. They have seen a significant increase of the prices for some of them that translate into better return on economics. And as a consequence, we can hear more and more companies that are unlocking decisions about adding capacity. But depending on the construction cycle, it might not be available before at least 18 months, if not to say 24 months. So that gives you a little bit of a time horizon that it's not going to short-term help to improve the situation by any means.
I see a bit of the same, if I can build on this, with two processes that need also to be mentioned. But first, let me say hello to Francois, which I had the pleasure to work with for a time. And I see two trends that are coming up. The first one is related to what was already supposed to come in terms of increasing capacity. And on semiconductors, we know that there were factories opening in other sides of the world just to differentiate a strategy that was in the hands of 7 big producers in the world. So this, of course, will speed up that process. But again, it was a strategy, as Thierry was saying, that was already set up some years ago, and that is now just enhanced by the current situation. And the second one, out of the localization dynamics that I was saying before, those, of course, will contribute to increasing the overall capacity on some particular items or maybe on some particular manufacturers. On the other hand, let's consider that also demographics are going up anyway. So over the very long trend, this capacity will be filled up, and probably we will speak again about filling a gap of capacity back in some specific industries. It is really very much also industry driven.
Great. And happy to see that the audience is indeed raising lots of questions. So no further hesitation. Let's go with Arian's question. How do you see the role of distribution companies? In my opinion, it's changed compared to 2 years ago.
There might be different consideration on the role of distribution companies depending on industries. So I'm not sure in which respect that question is raised, but if we take a more generic setup of a distribution that is bridging big producing companies to an atomized set of customers, for sure for those distribution companies, there will be a little bit in between. If I may use the Big Mac or the cheeseburger, they are a bit stuck in the middle of two components that are over influencing their destiny. One are the big producers, whether they will be continuing to look at distribution the same way, or are they going to be tempted to potentially go and touch directly the customers, revisiting their way? At the same time, the customer may be feeling the inability for certain distribution channel to fulfill their needs and potentially be inclined to revisit those. So yes, there could be different influences that may require those distribution companies to potentially eventually reinvent themselves. So for example, also those companies that were very much driven towards organizing the distribution and supply chain, bringing material from one region to another, if there is a bit more regionalization in the future, meaning one region customer trying to only tap into regionally produced material, then certainly those international trading firms or distribution firms potentially could see an effect on their business. I don't know if I've answered the question in the way it was intended to be phrased or to be raised.
To add on this, I can tell you that probably distribution companies changed role because, of course, they are going also to tap on the local for local. But there are two changes that are coming up. The first one is the ecological transition, the sustainable transition of the distribution companies. And for the moment, this has been really slowed down because nobody was willing to make investment in a time of uncertainty. I had the chance to hear in Geneva a couple of months ago the report of Kuehne+Nagel to get in contact with their chief of sustainability officer. And he was saying exactly this, giving the message that anyway, the transition will support growth there. And at the end, the slowdown of all the transports, like it happened over the last time, was supposed to be temporary, which is captured also in Credit Suisse financial report over the investment of 2022. They are not seeing anyway a logistic reduction of the operations there. So seems like probably they need to adapt to a local for local condition that will be pushed further compared to the past years, but with the chances of picking up the 100% of their prior business speed or even more.
Okay, amazing. Let's listen to another CPO. Let's listen to Nick, and that's his question. What information are you looking at to judge how long the market rise will last?
I can take it first.
Yeah.
I reply on Tuesday. I had a networking lunch with a bunch of other CEO, CFO, and there was also the chief of investment officer of Credit Suisse, Burkhard Barnold, there. And he was clear in mentioning that there are three drivers that could support or not anyway the overall market rise. The first is, of course, the increase of the consumption, which is not expected. So the consumption is coming back at prior levels, but didn't increase at all. The second is, of course, the inflation trend, and this could be driven by the lack of specific raw materials and whatever. And the third are the irrational behaviors of both users and producers. And on this, probably in terms of irrational behavior, there is also building too much stock at a certain period of time. If we mix this with the two well-described issues that Thierry mentioned before, so the energy crunch and the capacity that was no more there on some raw materials. The problem is probably all linked to how long will last the capacity issue. In the reports the official reports from bankers, investors, and whatever usually don't support these to go beyond 2022. Now, nobody has the crystal ball to define a given date for seeing this situation ending up 100%. But let's tie back to what happened on the energy market, right? Why the energy is so high? China was challenged in using coke and oil, right? They had to switch on gas for power, or even to switch off some power production plants. And so this rises the natural gas at double of the price that was just 3 months ago. But how long the natural gas could last at this level when the winter is over, maybe in 3 months, 4 months from now, and the most of the consumption for heating will drop. So this will be probably something that will start disappearing, or at least fading out in the second part of the year, of course. And then when all the stocks will be built, when all the capacity will be recovered to normal standards, what could still support an inflation trend like this one? Probably we will see high deflation at a given moment of time. Again, if we look to official reports, they are saying end of 2022. I cannot commit on this, but it's true that it would be wise setting up a strategy of covering the needs from a strategic perspective, which includes the top and bottom line perspective that you mentioned before, Giuseppe, and setting up a strategy that could be flexible over the end of the next year. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And if I may add, Nick, to the answer provided by Francesco, is at least for people that are direct metal related, that might be a different answer for people in the technology world or different industries. But for the industries that are very much manufacturing driven, with a lot of input cost, there are three elements that at least I would advise to look at. One is a careful look at supply versus demand balance, not only on tier 1, but on tier 1, tier 2, and maybe tier 3 if needed, because the problem we have seen is that the surprise doesn't come from the tier 1 that we all know best, but it's a surprise that comes from the tier 2 that nobody knew that, hey, wait a second, I didn't know that I was having this exposure to this natural material that is plant-based, that there is no labor due to COVID-19 to harvest anymore, and suddenly, downstream, big problem. So that supply-demand balance along the value chain becomes of essence to understand where it is at the moment, find the right indicators, the right market information if they exist, and that's an essential piece. The second piece is how much a certain product value chain is exposed to some of the mega trends, such as decarbonization. That will come at a cost. And this one is not going to vanish anytime soon. On the contrary, it will be costing more and more. So if there is a significant exposure to the need for decarbonizing, then suddenly you have a different perspective, no matter what the supply-demand balance is. And the third thing is Is it an industry, a value chain that is very much connected to some kind of like regulatory influence, meaning that there is a potential change of the regulatory environment that say, okay, there is enough supply-demand capacity. There is no, it's okay from an environmental standpoint, from a carbon, but for whatever reason, there is a change of regulation around the use of that product or the way it's manufactured, and suddenly it creates a cost surge unexpected. So I think I will advise to look into those three buckets of potential significant influence moving forward that could have many very different dynamics that will influence the how the market will behave from a price standpoint.
Wow. I mean, a very rich answer. Thank you very much, Francesco and Thierry. You're really covering it all. I remember the audience, if you have any question, feel free to use the chat to raise the question. And I suggest we go to the next question from the chat, which is, would you advise to create an emergency or opportunity internal budget or fund to trigger more spot buying for raw materials? So on top of being mid to long term for securing supply.
In my experience, emergency budgets could be good one-off, but have to deal with a challenge which is not being captured financially 100% from the company. So my work along 2021 and my work also for the next year will be probably providing the good drivers to make our budget more robust and more solid, rather than going maybe for spot budgets and whatever. Those will need anyway to be taken into consideration. We have specific markets, we know, of chemicals, of specialties, which rise by 200%. So no budget could cover them. But ensuring that your financial budget ties very well to the information that you have regarding your costs makes everyone sure inside of your business that those costs are calculated correctly, even when it comes to calculating the standard cost of your product, and then to pricing properly your product, which is probably the end point of view that could really make the difference. The other advice that I would give in this specific case is, we used for the last 2 decades to measure the effectiveness of a procurement and supply structure out of the on-time delivery, the quality, and the value creation, which has to do again with the material productivity. And material productivity is usually measured on a year-over-year perspective, meaning if I'm paying something 2 this year and next year I will pay 1, another 1, the difference between those 2 numbers is basically the saving that I'm bringing back to the company. Now, we will have inflationary years in front of us. I guess at least 1, probably 2. And then material productivity, as it has been thought before, will disappear. You need to measure also your cost avoidance to make sure that your company knows how the business is positioned towards the global trend of that business. And cost avoidance has not been something measured very well before. So I would insist in creating a robust budget and in measuring your position towards the market as the 2 main things that should be done from a financial perspective, rather than creating sacks that could be good, I would say, emergency slopes if you want, but definitely not working on a regular perspective.
Not much to add. The only evolution we have seen is procurement in most of those manufacturing and industries came really in the center of attention. It's a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. It's a challenge because you are exposed, your capability to read the market, to provide a consistent outlook on which the company can make those standard decisions as, do I go out and buy on spot, or I limit my production, as an example, because the spot purchase is too expensive, is really very much driven by the intelligence on how to read the market. So yes, on one hand it's an exposure, but on the other hand it's an opportunity. Why? Because it strengthens the connection with the business. And when I say the business, the true business, meaning how a company is looking distant forward in the future, how they position their price management capability on the top line, and how it is getting synchronized with the movements of the input cost. And what we have seen is this acceleration of change of cycles and order of magnitude that is absolutely unprecedented. Those swings that are absolutely massive, they do require this very in-depth connection between the procurement organization and the business, meaning the top line, the people that have the top line responsibility in the company, so that things are well orchestrated, no matter what is required. Buy on spot, don't buy on spot. It's more on how any company can digest those actions by properly reflecting on the selling price capability to get the participation from the downstream to the potential additional cost that such a spot buy will require.
Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And let me build maybe on the last comment from Thierry about the role of procurement organization, the increased visibility, connection with the business. And I'll raise one last question that probably will also be an opportunity to make a summary about some of the key messages that you gave until now, and how procurement organization can best support their companies in such a situation.
Well, I will use two words just as a guiding principle. Companies are rediscovering the importance of the word resiliency. Become resilient. So it means that no matter what happens, no matter what the circumstances are, the company can continue to operate, deliver its customers, pay its employees, and pay dividend to the shareholders. And the second word I will use is the agility. If there is one thing for sure that all of us we now know, is that nothing is certain. So it's impossible to say, I have the winning strategy. I've studied things in a so detailed manner for the last 3 years, and now I know it. And here is the strategy, and I'm starting to implement, and then something that nobody could anticipate is happening. And suddenly all your strategy falls apart. So it's all about the agility. The concept of agility is we need to work on building up the resiliency. So, for example, revisiting the way we work across the different regions. If there is some exposure, the way we work with the suppliers, the way we look at inventories, the way we look at capacities, utilization, and all those things. But at the same time, we build up that resiliency. We try to de-risk a lot of aspects in the supply chain. We need to create the agility that would be required as a response to crisis, but agility that will be a competitive fundamental that will differentiate companies that are successful versus the companies that will be less successful.
Great. I'm interested to hear also the perspective of Francesco on this one.
No, I agree with Thierry on a very large extent. Those are the actions. He was very strategic in giving his reply, and I do agree with this. Keeping on the same level of strategy, I can tell you that I measured also the efficiency of a supply chain department, which was effective on the market in the feeling of safety that the department gave to the whole business. We know that when a shortage, especially shortages, of course, more than price increases, when a shortage could impact your production continuity, things could rush in a very short time, becoming very stressful inside of your organization, and you would discover a lot of your colleagues really under pressure for this. I would say that really keeping calm, making a step back, giving the right visibility to the actions that you are currently doing, involving the other departments in a true cross-functional value delivered solution that could be rationally bought in by all the departments, and making sure that your action is done towards the customer perspective rather than towards the short-term management perspective are probably the three most difficult things that need to be done. And honestly, I think that there's a building of experience and also of hard skin, if you want, out of the procurement and supply resources that could play a lot. We are experienced to those kind of deals. How many times we did shelter the organizations we are working for without them even noticing this or knowing that there was a risk. So we know how to deal with the risk. Now the risk is going a level beyond. It's going to impact our production, to be a true issue for our production. Sometimes we need to bring the same kind of calmness and moderated approach. We need to keep calm, to keep the calm for the whole structure sometimes, and to guide towards the strategies. I really felt this need even inside of very major companies, and we have skills for that as procurement and supply professionals.
I think Francesco is really right. It's a difficult combo to organize for any procurement organization. On one hand, we want to be even more deeply strategically driven. We need to position our view of the market and the needs of the company and how to position and bridge the two on a very strategic manner. But we need to also realize, and we need to have the people trained for that, don't get stuck on one strategy, because you might need to have this agility I was referring to, navigate around that main strategy depending on the short-term hiccups and circumstances. So it's a preparation for also the people. Not all procurement organization, not everyone has been educated in that way, and it does require a lot of work on the people to make them ready, to train them, to make them more confident with those aspects of their job.
Fantastic. Just a couple of process points for our participants. I do see a question on the chat, which we already covered before. So, if you joined a bit later than the start time, the good news, the recording of this event will be available. If you sign up for this event, then you should get the recording automatically. If that's not the case, just send me a message on LinkedIn and I will share with you the recording, or I'll probably share it also on my channel, but I think you should all get it. Second thing, if you have a strong interest about what is happening in the market, then in 1 month from now, on the 8th of December, then we're going to talk about the global supply chain disruption. So talking with the CPO of MSC Cargo, second largest company, and from the global supply chain director of Logitech, and they will give us some insight about what is happening both from the perspective of the people that have the cargo and the people that buy the cargo. So another exciting event coming up. To conclude today, a warm thank you to Francesco and Thierry for sharing their knowledge, their insight, and making this workshop very insightful for our audience. Thank you all for your questions and your comments, and look forward to connect with each other soon. Thanks again. All the very best.
Thank you.
Bye then.
And good luck.
It's not going to